In April 2003, deep inside Utah's Blue John Canyon, a single mistake turned a casual solo hike into a sealed death trap. Aron Ralston, an experienced climber, found his arm crushed beneath an 800-pound boulder, alone, unseen, and unreachable. For days, he waited, rationing water, marking time, convincing himself rescue would come. But as the canyon stayed silent and his body began to fail, one reality became impossible to ignore. Escape was still possible, but only if he was willing to do something no human is ever meant to do. It had to go. Aron Lee Ralston was born on October 27, 1975, in Indianapolis, Indiana, raised by parents who encouraged independence and curiosity. And by his 20s, he had built an identity around self-reliance, earning a degree in mechanical engineering, moving west, and spending nearly every free moment climbing, hiking, and canyoneering alone, believing solitude sharpened judgment rather than endangered it, a belief reinforced by years of uneventful solo trips, where preparation and confidence always seemed enough. By April 2003, Aron was living in Aspen, Colorado, fit, experienced, and quietly restless. And on the morning of April 26, 2003, he made a decision so small it barely registered. He chose not to tell anyone where he was going, grabbing his gear and driving toward Blue John Canyon in Utah, a remote slot canyon system he had never explored but felt confident navigating, thinking he'd be back by dinner, a thought that didn't feel reckless to him because nothing bad ever had before. The weather was clear, the desert calm, and as he parked his truck and set off alone, he felt the familiar satisfaction of isolation, later recalling that the silence felt earned, not dangerous. And as he descended into the narrow sandstone corridors, squeezing through passages carved by water over millennia, he talked to himself occasionally, narrating moves under his breath. Left foot here, easy. Treating the canyon like a puzzle meant to be solved, stopping to admire light filtering down the rock walls, even laughing once when he slipped slightly and caught himself, saying aloud, "That would have been stupid," unaware how close that joke would come to prophecy. Aron carried limited supplies, some food, a small amount of water, a multi-tool, a camera, enough for a day trip, not a disappearance. And as he moved deeper into Blue John Canyon, the walls narrowed further, forcing him to stem between rock faces, twist sideways, lower himself carefully, the canyon growing quieter, heavier, the kind of place where sound dies quickly. And at one point, he reached a sloping chute cluttered with loose stones and wedged boulders, pausing to assess his route, tapping a rock with his boot, and looks solid enough? Trusting experience over caution, because experience had never betrayed him before. Above him, unseen, sat an 800-pound boulder, balanced by erosion and time, stable only until it wasn't. And as Aron shifted his weight and reached forward to descend, placing his right hand against the canyon wall for balance, he had no warning. No cracking sound, no rumble, just the sudden, violent movement of stone as the boulder shifted free, accelerating downward in a space too narrow to escape. And in that fraction of a second before impact, the last normal thought he had was not fear, but surprise. The realization that something had gone wrong far faster than preparation could correct. The boulder slammed down with crushing force, pinning Aron Ralston's right forearm against the canyon wall, the impact so sudden that for a split second his brain refused to register what had happened, because pain arrived before comprehension, a white-hot shock that tore through his body and forced a scream out of him that vanished instantly into the rock, swallowed by the canyon's narrow throat. And when the noise died, he was left with the impossible stillness of realization, his arm immovable, wedged between sandstone and an 800-pound slab that had no intention of yielding. He tried instinctively to pull free, then to push the boulder upward, then to lever it sideways using his legs, cycling through disbelief and adrenaline, breathing hard and repeating, "No, no, no," as if denial alone might reverse physics. But the rock did not move, and when he stopped struggling, the pain sharpened, settling into something deeper and more precise, the sensation of bones crushed and nerves screaming. Hours passed before he fully accepted the truth. No one knew where he was, no one was coming. And in that acceptance, time stretched grotesquely, daylight sliding across the canyon walls while he rationed sips of water, measuring survival in mouthfuls, licking condensation off stone, using his video camera to document his condition, speaking calmly into the lens for family and friends, telling jokes that sounded thin even to him, then later recording goodbyes when optimism collapsed, his voice steady as he said things like, "Mom, Dad, I love you." Because breaking down felt like surrender. Each night the desert temperature dropped, his trapped arms swelling and turning purple, circulation compromised, pain evolving into numbness that terrified him more than agony ever had. And to stay awake, he sang songs, recited childhood memories, and carved his name and dates into the canyon wall with his knife, marking time like a prisoner counting days. Until by the fourth day, hallucinations crept in. Visions of water, of voices, of a child he didn't have, and then a dream so vivid it felt like prophecy. Aron imagined himself free, hiking out of the canyon, holding a small boy with one arm. And when he woke, dehydrated and weak, he understood with chilling clarity that the dream wasn't comfort, it was instruction, that survival required a decision he had been avoiding. On the fifth day, May 1st, 2003, with no water left and his strength failing, Aron tested the limits of his own body, realizing the trapped bones could be broken using leverage against the canyon wall. And as that realization settled, he whispered aloud, "This is it." Not in panic, but in grim acknowledgement that the only way out of Blue John Canyon would cost him his arm or his life. Once the decision was made, fear changed shape, shrinking from panic into something colder and more focused. Because Aron Ralston understood that hesitation would kill him faster than pain. And with his body already weakened by dehydration and exposure, he began by doing the unthinkable first. He snapped the bones in his forearm, using the canyon wall as leverage, bracing his legs, pulling with his entire body until he felt and heard the dull crack, a sound he later described as strangely distant, as if it belonged to someone else. And he screamed then, "Ah!" Not because it hurt more than before, but because the act crossed a line the human mind is wired never to cross. Once the bones were broken, there was no going back. And using the small multi-tool he had carried casually for years, never imagining it would become a surgical instrument, he began cutting through skin and muscle, working slowly, deliberately, narrating the process to himself in a detached voice. Okay, just tissue now. Because turning it into a procedure instead of violence was the only way to stay functional. And when he reached the nerves, the pain surged with such intensity that his vision narrowed and he nearly lost consciousness, biting down on his arm to stay awake, forcing himself through each movement while whispering, "Don't stop, don't stop," knowing that stopping halfway would be fatal. The final cut severed the remaining tendons, and suddenly the weight was gone, the canyon opening up around him in a way that felt unreal, his arm left behind beneath the boulder. And for a moment, Aron simply sat there, stunned, bleeding heavily, but alive, the silence rushing back in as if nothing extraordinary had just occurred. Survival mode returned instantly, and he cauterized the wound using what little equipment he had, wrapped the stump tightly, and began the next impossible task, getting out. Rappelling down a 65-foot cliff with one arm, then hiking several miles through desert heat, dizzy and losing blood, until, hours later, he encountered a family of hikers who froze when they saw him, one of them gasping, "Oh my God," as Aron calmly said, "I need help." Collapsing shortly after as rescue teams were called, helicopters dispatched, and the reality of what he had done finally caught up to the world outside the canyon. Aron Ralston was airlifted to a hospital in Moab, Utah on May 1st, 2003, having lost nearly 25% of his blood volume, doctors moving quickly to stabilize him as the story of his survival spread through emergency channels with disbelief. And when surgeons confirmed he would live, the reality of what he had done settled in, not as triumph, but exhaustion. His body spared only because his mind had refused to surrender. Recovery was long, and physical pain was only part of it, as Aron had to relearn balance, coordination, and identity itself, adapting to a prosthetic arm while confronting the public fascination that turned his private ordeal into global news. A transformation that intensified after the release of his memoir, Between a Rock and a Hard Place, in 2004, where he documented the choices, hallucinations, and mistakes that led him to Blue John Canyon, including the one decision he repeatedly emphasized as fatal in near-miss form, not telling anyone where he was going. Instead Instead of retreating, Aron leaned into reinvention, becoming a motivational speaker. Returning to the outdoors, he refused to let fear reclaim. Climbing again, canyoneering again, even revisiting Blue John Canyon years later to retrieve the remains of his arm and give them a proper burial. A personal act of closure that underscored how survival did not erase trauma, it reorganized it. In 2010, director Danny Boyle adapted his story into the film 127 Hours.